Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Life West Leadership Line. We've got a wonderful guest today, Dr. Rob Sinnott. Rob, welcome to the Life West Leadership Line.
Great to be there, El Presidente. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. I don't know if you're like between Mars or Venus or whatever's going on in the background over there, or atoms and cells. I love it. I love your background.
Well, it's a little. There's a brain and all kinds of fun things back there. So I had to have something dark to contrast my pastiness. My Irish heritage.
You look great. You look great. What I want to do, hey, first of all, for our listeners today, we're in for a treat. Rob graduated from Palmer College. He's got this really, Rob, if I could say this kindly, you've got a phenomenal brain, a beautiful mind. He graduated with research honors, has all kinds of information on research. He's doing a ton of research, which hopefully he'll share today. And he's also a philosopher. He's got his diplomat in the philosophy program. He teaches the diplomat program, along with another group of people, but he's just had his hands on both sides of the fence. And it's really cool because, when you talk about science, Einstein said you can't prove a science without philosophy, right? They go hand in hand. But talk to us, Rob. Tell me what you've been up to lately and what's been happening.
Well, I never liked to read a lot when I was just in general, but boy, research papers to me, I don't know what it is, but I just love reading through them. I was reading one this morning because of what we're going through as this pandemic that's going on right now. I was reading a little bit about what they're finding with the immune system as far as being stress vulnerable or stress resilient. And it's so interesting to me to watch what they're doing and see where science was leading. But unfortunately, that level of science, that understanding of science today isn't prevalent because it's so entrenched. Things take so long to change. There's a group of medical doctors around the world. They're at Georgetown. There are a lot of major universities in the medical schools, and they're trying to change the focus of medicine from fighting disease in what they call the heroic application to improving the level of health, which is really what they're finding this is all about. Not necessarily COVID, but the whole immune function. It's about, it's that argument between Claude Bernard and his student, Louis Pasteur about the soil or the seed. And, we know that it's neither one or the other. It's both. But if we ignore the soil, it's to our own detriment.
That's right. And the host health. I mean, it's a whole, thing around host health, right? And it's really, if I see silver linings, I've probably said this before on leadership lines, one of the silver linings is this gives us a really great opportunity to reframe, how we communicate, the chiropractic message, right? Like what are we actually doing, right?
Absolutely.
And it leads us into something because, it's like what they're trying to do right now, and I think they're doing the best they can. I'm not down on anybody about this, but they're trying to forecast what's going to take place, right?
Right.
And we know we can forecast the weather, and they do a pretty good job of that these days, and we can forecast the economy. They miss sometimes, but they do a pretty decent job on that, But when we talk about forecasting health, forecasting around that level, or, you mentioned adaptability, that's a very interesting topic, isn't it?
Well, it is because, one of the problems they're having in relation to this COVID-19 issue is that there isn't a big pool of data. They haven't been following it long enough to learn what the trail is behind it. And as long as they're looking for the heroic application of something you put into the body, in my practice, I've been practicing now. I'm in my 31st year. I have 30 more to go. I have a friend he's in his 72nd year of practice, so I've, hopefully pass him up someday. But what we talk about in the way we look at things as chiropractors is so much different because we're not looking for the symptom of a vertebral subluxation. What we're looking for or caused by that may be caused or whatever. That's not our point. They're looking for the reason they don't have a lot of information. Well, we think this drug is great. And then it turns out, well, it's not. Well, we think ventilators are good. Well, maybe not. And you should take ibuprofen. Don't take ibuprofen. And, it might be high blood pressure medication might be involved. And the reason is because there's such a short trail behind this because the level of time science has had to study what's happened because of it is so short, they can't put the data together in that model well enough. And what the problem is they're following what we call in economics a lagging indicator. A lagging indicator is following that trail to see if you can understand what's happening. And a leading indicator, something that's out in front of it, would be more of following the level of adaptability in a person, because if they're not adapting properly, that is going to indicate where their health is going better than just about anything outside of a traumatic nature. It's not going to predict who gets hit with a piece of Skylab, but if you think about it, what they're doing in the more major research universities in their neonatal intensive care units now, they're using EKGs on the premature children, premature babies, and they're measuring heart rate variability live. And that level of heart rate variability, when they see that level drop precipitously, that's a leading indicator to them. And what it tells them is that 2 days before there's a symptom, this child is likely heading into sepsis, which is a full body major issue that sadly a lot of these children die from. And so 2 days before there's a symptom from a medical perspective, they can intervene. In chiropractic, we're not necessarily trying to, change the level of sepsis. That's not our point. Our point is that a leading indicator is that level of adaptability. And whatever we measure in our office as an indicator of adaptability, whatever that is. And I don't really want to say this is better than this one or whatever it might be, because quite honestly, our research community is woefully behind in their work as a whole. And I mean, the WFC recently confessed to the profession that we have no research on the immune system, and somehow made it sound like it's our fault in the field. The fault lies with research for not doing anything. It's not that we don't have positive research. We have no research. D.D. Palmer asked the seminal question of our philosophy. He said, why? Why are two men working in the same shop, eating at the same bench, breathing the same air? One is sick and one isn't. What's the difference? That is the seminal question of our profession. And they have not done a single study, attempted to do a single study to show that, according to what they wrote in their document, which to me is a horrible confession of theirs, but they framed it like it's all of our fault. We can't how am I supposed to, in my office, do a randomized controlled trial where I say, well, I'm going to randomly decide which people of this character I'm going to adjust or just have them keep coming back for no apparent reason whatsoever to them. I mean, it doesn't work. Right. Randomized controlled trials keep the profession, the field doctors that should have a voice in what we're looking into, it keeps them out of the equation. And I think that's a big impetus behind it. It's kind of sad, but if we look at a leading indicator like they're starting to do in these NIC units, and I'm not saying everybody needs to run and get heart rate variability, but our researchers need to do that. We need to start looking at that level, and I know they're doing some at Life West. I hear it from students in other universities and other parts of the world that tell me that they've been communicating with your students at your school. So I know there's good things happening out there, but when we really need to look at that leading indicator, because it shows where health is going. Not a scientist, but I didn't see the show myself or even watch the clip, but I saw a little quote from Bill Maher the other day. He said something about how essential workers are people that can optimize the level of health instead of in people, because that's a bigger issue right now. And I think science would shake their head and go, well, yeah, that is.
Well, you look at the leading indicator like you talk about and the lagging indicators. I mean, one of the things that happens with lagging indicators is it creates frustration. And we're all going through that right now. The lagging indicator is, what are we going to be doing? What's shelter in place going to, what's next? What is social distancing, and can we have a conference? And we're waiting for all this stuff to kind of come, and we're passing it up. But and the leading indicators are where it's at, and that's what we've always talked about, isn't it? I mean,
I don't think there's ever been a
philosophy, right?
Yeah.
So pure chiropractic, it's all about, it's not about chasing a symptom, it's about getting in front of it, right? And having these indicators. It's just like you said, how do we see what these indicators are?
And people are more interested in health right now people that obviously never had a lot of interest in health, they're panicked right now. So they're looking for health. They're out, you see people on bike trails out walking fast or whatever it might be. You can tell they've never been on one before, and God bless them. I think that's a wonderful thing that they're saying, hey, I need to get my proverbial act together. But, you know, as a profession, we need to start thinking in those terms of whether someone is stress resilient and their body is in a state where it can handle that stressor that Dee Dee talked about, the three types of stress, you know, the physical, the chemical, and the psychological stress. If they're stress resilient, they can handle those things. If they're stress vulnerable, you know, and when someone comes into your office and they sit in a chair, you know, whatever it is, wherever you check people at, and you say to them, well, let's see how your nerve system's doing. Well, they're already thinking, I already know the answer. I'm fine. I feel good, because they think that equates to their nerve system. Well, let's see how your spine's doing. Well, they think their spine's good because they think they can feel that. But let's see how you're adapting today is a much different, it reframes the whole conversation. And it's a great opening opportunity, because, you know, determining if there's a stress vulnerability in someone is part of finding that subluxation. It's that mental impulse. The purpose of a mental impulse, according to, you know, our philosophy, is to adapt that tissue cell for a moment in time. And the reason it's always been an abstract concept is until 1998, science hadn't provided any data as to how information got from all of our viscera back, for example, back to the brain, because the vagus nerve, when I went to school, when you went to school, was a one-way street. Right. And now we know it's 70 to 80% the other direction. You know, the brain's, the innate intelligence is drawing information. There's interleukin-1 receptors on the terminal bulbs of the vagus nerve, and they're finding that they don't make permanent connections, that they can move. I mean, they don't run around your body, but they move in a very slight way, because it's an intellectual process that's going on. And your nucleus tractus solitarius can send a targeted strike to this, right where that sliver is in my finger, to send white blood cells there. It doesn't send it to everywhere in my body. It doesn't just gush me with white blood cells. It makes that argument of what needs to happen in the body at that location. There's such coordination, such complexity in our body. When we look at a computer, I'm no computer expert, but if you look at a computer, someone could explain to me all the parts. I could take a class about the structure and break down the anatomy of a computer and learn what all the parts do. And I can have a basic understanding. I'm sure there's mathematical equations I could be taught to say, if I change that RAM chip from 16 to 32 RAM, this is what you're going to expect to see in the performance of that computer. We know that. It's a given. It's you know, A plus B equals C. That's how it works. But that's a complicated structure. But in a complex structure, they have a living things are complex, and that's much different, because the complexity is another level, because that thing can adapt. A computer can't adapt. I know they're trying. You know, out in the Silicon Valley, they may do it. I don't know. But
artificial intelligence, right?
I have my doubts that they'll get to that point, but it's a little scary. But a living thing can adapt. So when you give a medication, they can test a group of people and say, this medication doesn't seem to have certain side effects, whatever it might be. And then when they give it to the general public, that side effect starts to show up, because they didn't study everyone, because we're all so complex. Even identical twin studies are showing that we can't compare identical twins in groups to the other identical twin in the other side of the group. Because they're complex. And it's that whole understanding of that makes chiropractic such an opportune thing, not for this moment, but for health. And that's what it's all about, because when you give a pill, this can happen. You can get B, or you could get A, B, and C, or you could get, you know, it could cause such a myriad of changes. When you take that blood pressure pill away, what happens to the blood pressure? Well, it goes back down. But if you give an adjustment, when you take the adjustment away, is that problem necessarily ever going to come back for that person? Or maybe it's a problem they didn't even know they had. If we measure heart rate variability, is that heart rate variability going to draw back to where it was? We don't know that for sure, because they're complex. If we give I'm trying to think of another good example of this, but this all leads back to kind of where I've been for the last 3 years now. And I didn't do we didn't do a adaptability symposium this year because this would have been our even numbered year to do it, because I need more people with data. And as the WFC kind of confessed to us, they're not doing anything. A survey saying I hurt less, that's really nice, but it's so subjective. We need to have better things than that, and we have them. So what I've been working on is a lot of entropy. If we can look at that level of complexity that something has, that organizational coordination behind it, and give that a numerical value before and after an adjustment, can we show that there's a increase in complexity? Because if you are, if I take you and blindfold you and throw you in the trunk of a car and take you to a parking lot, and I get out and someone gets in and starts driving and turning kind of erratically, well, it could be a professional driver driving through a slalom course, or a chauffeur doing exactly what they need to do at that moment, or it could be a chimpanzee behind the wheel, and you don't know from the trunk. And what entropy is going to be able to give us, some of these calculus equations that we've been pouring through is they've been shown to be extremely reliable. Some a p-value of less than 0.05 is considered a very reliable, a 95% probability, so to speak. We're looking at p-values that approach 10 to the negative 14th. There's nothing that's ever been done in chiropractic that's ever shown that level of probability, because science doesn't give us fact and it doesn't prove anything. Philosophy can prove things. That's deduction. That's formal logic. Informal logic, which they use in the scientific method, is fine. We need those things, but it can't tell us everything we need to know. So to determine who's driving that car, you need to take the blindfold off, and these entropy calculations are going to do that. So what we're doing, we hired 3 data scientists in Europe. The lead scientist is a professor at a university in Denmark who has a doctorate degree in mathematical physics. I don't. I don't know anything about that. I mean, I understand the studies, but doing this calculus stuff is difficult. So I gave them the formulas, and they're coding them and putting them into computer programs, and they're testing them right now. And so far they're showing for use with, say, heart rate variability. So between pairs of beats, if we have 3 beats, the space here and the space here, these 2 beats, the milliseconds here to the milliseconds here, so each one of those numbers, down to 20 sets of those numbers, it's just as accurate as it is with over 400. So we get the same numerical value with a small segment, and that's very, very handy as the ability to get good quality data improves in the HRV world. It's kind of, you have to have really good stuff to do it right now for science, but we're getting there. And
Rob, for our listeners, when you talk about HRV, and we're doing research here on it, but people sometimes wonder, well, what's HRV going to show? What does it actually do, right?
Yeah, well, there are thousands and thousands of studies. My last book, I used over 1,000 studies as references, and a lot of them are in the HRV world. But they've done heart rate variability on everything, every psychological phenomenon you can think of. Psychology, psychobiologists are probably leading the field in this. Ohio State's very far in front through Dr. Thayer and Bernson. Yuri Gidron, who we had speak at our first symposium. Virginia Tech has a mind-body lab there, and the head of their lab has spoken for us. And they're at every major university. And San Diego has the Navy down there has a great professor down there who's brilliant with this stuff, who's studying PTSD. And it's not just psychological. They've studied everything from fetal HRV all the way up to the end of our life. In every thing there have been studies of lepers, HRV levels. And what we pretty universally find is that most things have a decreased heart rate variability compared to a control group, which we kind of expect. The exceptions to that are things like nocturnal enuresis, duodenal ulcers, not gastric, but duodenal ulcers. And it has more to do, your embryology teacher, your embryology professor there at school would probably be interested in that, because they can differentiate embryologically why the duodenum may have a completely different result from the stomach, which it connects to. And that's how our education fits together. It's fascinating to me. A book in neuroimmunology, or
yeah, and when you tie in, and you talked about complexity, right? The human body is a complex system, right? And when you talk about that, there's ways that we're looking to read this complexity or get information extracted, right? And heart rate variability is a really reliable way to see how the body is adapting, right? How the body is functioning, and how the nervous system is actually, because the nervous system controls it.
It is. And how we're doing this then is we're taking, right now there's 2 entropy values, and I found another one recently that I think is pretty valuable, so we're going to have them do this third one. It's going to be put on a website. The Center for Chiropractic Progress is funding this. They're just a good group of people. They put on the Diplomate program, and they're good people. No one makes a penny from their group. Everything is done gratis. They're really good, honest people. But they're funding this. We're going to put a website up where these calculations exist. And any scientist in the world can upload data for free. Upload data, and it will give them the entropy value back for free. So the best way to get data out there is not make it difficult. The people who come up with these entropy values, they don't like to share the coding and all these things so other people can use them, because it's kind of their baby. And much to their chagrin, the 3 best ones will soon be available this summer online for free. There's no cost, there's no nothing. You just upload your Excel spreadsheet, it calculates the entropy values and gives them back to you. And I just sent them 200 and some entropy HRVs, pre and post and things like that, of everything from the people with cystic fibrosis and bedwetters and all kinds of things, so that we can get some sense of how this works. Because I mentioned the bedwetter specifically because we're doing a bedwetting study right now with another European researcher who's leading this. He's a PhD in psychoneuroimmunology, and he's very interested in what we're going to find, because their heart rate variability for those kids is higher than it is for the typical kid. Well, that's kind of different. But if we adjust them, will it come down, which is not usually what we see. We usually see it go up. Will it come down? And if we run it through these complexity analysis, but now as the chauffeur behind the wheel, where before it looked like there was a lot going on and they had a lot of variability because the chimpanzee was behind the wheel. And what I want to show is that entropy change happens. And in a pilot study I did in my own office, just to see if there was any validity to this theory at all, it's exactly what we found. So I'm not involved in gathering data. I merely clean the data and send it off to this doctor, and because we're separating it, the pieces, so no one can have an influence over the results.
It's so important, and I just want to thank you, because I know you have a love for it. You've talked about this for years. You have a love for the science, and you have a love for the research, and I think that's great. It's what we need. And one of these silver linings that you talked about is that we have to start seeing that we as a profession, for me, I think we've done enough low back pain, stuff. We've done neck pain, we've done headaches, things like that. We need to really start moving the needle and to that place of, salutogenesis, or that place of creating health, or the leading indicator, right?
Absolutely.
How can we show that and be able to do that? And the work you're doing is what it is showing that, we'll see if it shows it.
My whole purpose is to be an impetus to get this work done. I don't want to be the researcher doing these things. I'm policy, not detail, as far as those things. I am always happy to help. We have, I believe, I have out right now 6 electrocardiographs that are sent out to chiropractors' offices who are trained in certain techniques at a mastery level, because I want to use the best people we can find, and then they're gathering the data on these anoretic children. I have I have some really great equipment that I don't charge anything to use it. I just bought it because I want to see it get out there and get used. And the Center for Chiropractic Progress has some as well. They're just all any of us want to see is good things for the profession. None of us want a medal. We don't need anything for the wall. I got this cool drawing back here. What do I need? All I want to see is chiropractic answer Dee Dee's question of why. What is the difference in those two people? We need to get out of the trunk and look around and understand what we do as chiropractors. And the only way to do that is for the profession itself, each of the people watching this, to take an interest in this. Not that they have to do the work, but to keep a finger on that pulse of research and see what's going on. Because it's sad to me that, it's 110 years since Dee Dee put that question in his first book, and no one's tried to answer it. So
I think it's happening, Rob. And this is, we'll kind of end on this, but it's happening because I just was on the phone with a Canadian doctor the other day, 2 days ago, and they have a group that they're raising, I don't know if it's $25,000 or $50,000 to give to a research scientist at one of the leading universities, right, in their province, to take the data that shows chiropractic and immune response and different kinds of things like that, and to do a complete scrub of all of it and say what's valid and what's not valid, right? Because there's groups out there that say, oh, that's not valid, and this isn't valid, this and that. So they're literally, there's interest, and I've got people calling us saying, hey, how can we help? Can we donate towards research? And thank you for all of you that have done that. If anyone is listening, if you want to, please, you can donate it specifically towards that, because this is what we're doing. And it's not just to prove chiropractic works. We know chiropractic works.
Right.
Anecdotally, we see it every day in our offices, right? But we want to be able to do it on a research level to show just how well it works, right? And what it does and the power that's behind an adjustment actually, within the body, right? And I love what you talked about, having that leading edge. And
yes, that where we have to go to. Yes. Well, I know that COVID's not the flu from 100 years ago. I completely understand that. But there's one inescapable fact that we have to understand, and how this affects our profession. Palmer was the biggest school for the entirety of the last century. And I don't keep track of numbers, so I don't know if they are or not or whatever right now, but be that as it may, they went from having 30 to 50 students in a class before the flu. In June of 1920, which is just after the flu, they had their first class of 1,000 incoming students. Now, that's not just something that just happened and, all these people ran in. It's not a coincidence that, those of us that have been at this for a number of years know people who talked about what happened during the flu, and to them as children or whatever it might be, that it started their parents or themselves later in life into becoming a chiropractor. We have to recognize the fact that we may not be able, science may not have data yet to give us probability, but the proof is there. The proof comes from formal logic, and formal logic isn't science. So when science says they're going to prove something, it's impossible. They give us probability, and it has a value, and that's where we need to look. We need to look to them to start answering the right questions instead of their own. Yeah. Because there's no L4 study, so none of us should touch an L4 today. Or an L3. There's no L3 studies. There's nothing.
Yeah, right.
The fifth lumbar. That's all we have.
Study, right? So don't touch C4. I hear you loud and clear. And thank you, man. The work you're doing and things that, the Chiropractic Center for Progress, and it's just really cool. These are dedicated people looking to make a change. Like you said, no one even knows who they are, but they're making a change for the profession. And it's really what it's about. I think that's what most of us, and maybe as we get older, in our more seasoned, we realize it's not about us. It's really about, what we're going to leave behind. And it's really, I just thank you so much. So Rob, thanks for being with us. To our listeners, Rob's got a few books out. Rob, how do they get a hold of you or maybe be able to?
Well, they're on www.lulu.com, lulu.com. The textbook of chiropractic philosophy and the textbook of human adaptability are
LU.com?
LULU.com. And they'll be coming out this summer. The first book, the philosophy book, will be coming out this summer in both Spanish and French.
Nice. Well, our producers will Shane's the wizard. He'll put that on the bottom, and
that's okay.
Check this stuff out. I mean, Rob, when you spoke at the Wave, your books went off the shelf. I mean, they were in line. You were signing books, and they're really phenomenal. So
that's kind of you. But it's about chiropractic to me. I mean,
of course it is. Okay.
And I appreciate everything you're doing out there, and keeping everybody focused and the feet to the fire that need to be the fire, and we get to this together, and this division in our profession over immune system, I don't understand how this can be. I'm reading a paper now, and the title of it was Immune and Neuroendocrine Mechanisms of Stress, Vulnerability, and Resistance. I mean, you can't write anything much more chiropractic than that, and there's no chiropractic.
Exactly. All right, well, listen, we can talk forever. I do appreciate you.
Thank you.
To our listeners, thank you for listening in. Rob dropped a bunch of pearls of wisdom, and I just love the lagging and the leading. It's just incredible, and it's all about adaptability. So come back at us at our next Life West Leadership Line. Just know that we love and appreciate you, all that you do for the profession, all you do in your communities. You're doing amazing things for people, and we hope to see you back. Love your friends, love your loved ones, and keep spreading the word. Okay, talk to you next time.